I'm working on a Makerbot Replicator 2X that I don't have a power supply for. It's got one of these where it uses the male pin style 4-pin connector. This is opposite of the typical one that you got on the Makerbot 2. Finding this one is a little more difficult and it's stupid expensive, like more than $200. So I really don't want to go that route. So instead, I'm going to modify this board so I can use an internal style power supply.
If that interests you, stay tuned. We'll get started.
So what you're looking at here, this is the power connector. It comes in and it's got 4 pins, and those 4 pins are here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what happens is these 2 are marked minus, these 2 are marked plus, and I checked with a meter, there's continuity between these 2 and these 2. So internally on the power plug, these 2 are connected. So what I want to do is I want to connect wires to those set of pins there that'll allow me then to connect to an internal style power supply. So I'm going to keep this really simple. I've tinned a couple pieces of wire here. I'm going to set those over top of these pins and I'm going to solder them to the bottom of the solder joints. So that'll give me 2 that look kind of like so. And these 2 then can connect to my 24 volt power supply. There are 2 tiny resistors right here, 1 and 2. I've got to be really careful with those. If I damage them, I don't have the soldering ability to repair those. I don't have any thermal pads, so I'm just going to stick some electrical tape over here just so solder doesn't get dropped or something stupid. So that's what I'm going to do. I've got the soldering iron heating up. And I'm going to start with the negative side. I'm going to solder it, and then I'll solder the positive side. I'm going to put a little bit of flux on these. I don't want to get that too close or I'll melt it. All right. All right. All right, done and done. So that's the end result. I'm going to put a little liquid insulator on this just to help prevent with the possibility of any short. Try and do this neatly. All right, let that dry, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do on the other end of those wires. And I suppose I should double check connectivity. So these should be continuous. And they are. Now the black wire and the red wire should not be. I'm using 16 gauge wire here. It's rated for 10 amps at 24 volts, so it should work out all right. So let's check continuity on these 2 and make sure there's not a short. All right, I don't have any. And now last, I want to check with the pins inside the connector and make sure that those pins and these wires do have connectivity. All right, so first, the negative side. Yep, and now the positive. Yep, we're good. All right. I added a little heat shrink and a label so that when I come back in here the next time, I remember what I did. I've very temporarily wired the board up to the power supply I'm going to use. This is a Meanwell LRS 224. It's a 24 volt power supply, 200 watts, makes about 8.8 amps. The Makerbot power supply, it's also made by Meanwell, but it's a 220 or a 9.2 amp. This was as close as I could get. I didn't want to exceed 9.2. So we're wired up temporarily. I haven't turned on the power to the power supply, but let's turn on the power supply. Let's check, see if everything works. Hopefully I didn't let the smoke out of this thing. Watch the LCD. Hopefully you can see it when it powers on. And we want to make sure we've got lights here LCD powers on, and the control module here accepts input. So power on. All right, got a power LED. Now Makerbot on. Got LEDs here. We've got an LED here. It's gonna give us an error because nothing's connected. Yep, so I'll hit OK. Sweet, so I would say that is working as expected. We can still use the Makerbot's power switch and just leave the power supply on full time if so desired. And I've printed a little plug that fits into the original 24-volt socket. This is still live, so if you put a voltmeter across here, you would get 24 volts. So I want to keep things out of there, but I also want to just have this look clean, and I want to make sure that nothing ever gets put in there, nothing ever gets plugged in. I don't know why it would, but you never know. So that plug fits in there, fits nice and tight, and that will just keep things out of that connector. This power supply I'm using, it's got 4 holes right on the top here. Those are 150 millimeters apart in this direction and 50 in this. I laid that out with a pair of calipers, and I've drilled mounting holes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount this to the underside, and then I'll install screws from above. I wanted to keep some space between the power supply and the actual body of the printer, just to allow airflow. So I printed off some spacers of the appropriate length. The holes on this power supply, they're M4 by 0.7. So if you happen to be using the same one, that's the screws you'll need. If you were to mount this directly to the body, these would be 6 millimeters long. I'm using 10 millimeters so I can have the extra space for clearance. So here's how that power supply came out when it's fully mounted. You can see I made a fan bracket here to add a fan, just for some additional cooling. I don't know how hot that's going to get, but I thought it was a good idea. I routed the wires, you can see them here. These are the ones that run into the backside of the motherboard. And then there's a main connector right here. So they run around, they connect up to the V plus and V minus on the power supply. And then this is that switch holder I printed. And you can see the wires come out of it and they run into the input of the power supply. I think it all looks pretty clean. I'm really happy with how it turned out. We will see how it works here in a minute. So if you've got one of these Makerbot replicators and you don't have a power supply for it, I think this is a pretty good solution.
Alright guys, that's it for today's video. The Makerbot is working really well. I think this is a really good upgrade for your Makerbot. The main benefit here is that you no longer have to buy a proprietary power supply. It opens up a lot of options and a lot of options for upgrades. I've uploaded all the 3D printed parts that you've seen me use to Thingiverse. I'll put a link in the description. That includes the plug for the socket, the spacers to hold the power supply in place, and the adapter for the power supply switch. I hope you enjoyed watching today's video. I had a lot of fun making it. If you did, please consider subscribing. So with that, thanks for watching.